Hi guys, welcome to Game On Outdoor Edition. Today we're filming outside in relatively beautiful weather, and we're taking on one of your requested topics for this episode, and that is, how can players contribute to and enrich in the world that your campaign takes place in?
Yeah, first of all, we'd like to thank all of our viewers and our subscribers. We do like it when you guys ask us questions, because it's fun to talk about and answer what you guys want to know about. So thanks again to Wendell for this question, one of our subscribers, and follow us on Twitter.
Way to go, Wendell.
Yes,
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Yeah, so any RPG is really, it's a cooperative game. It's not just the GM talking to you. We all get together and we play it to have fun. And I don't want to bring a character to a world and have the character feel like he's isolated in that world. I want him to, or her, to feel like she belongs in this world.
Well, sure. You're sitting at a table with a bunch of people who hopefully are all reasonably on the same page in wanting to enjoy and participate in this gaming experience, and the GM is there obviously to facilitate that, but they want to bring everybody in. So it's a lot more fun when everybody at the table is contributing in some way to the creative aspect of the game. It's certainly, from a GM's point of view, a lot more fun when your players bring something to you that you didn't expect, and it requires you to sort of adapt and enjoy their creativity in addition to all the things that you're providing for them.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think that it's good to know that at like a session 0, the very first game when you're kind of making characters, you talk to your GM about something like this. You say, hey, I want to add a part of my backstory to the flavor of the world.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, you want to contribute to the creativity of the game, but you don't want your creativity to break the game. So,
Exactly.
you don't want to derail a major plot point that your GM has planned because of something that you threw a curveball into. So it's definitely a good idea with anything really major or influential to run it past the GM first. But I know that when we were talking about this, the thing that first jumps out is, and this starts from episode 0 or setting up for your first episode, is player backstory. Right? A lot of people like to create a story of the history of their character, and that's great. Giving rich details and explaining their personality and their history and all that kind of stuff.
Definitely.
So there's a lot of potential in there to add to the environment of the game and even create subplots and side quests that can develop from those details.
I definitely agree, and I like the idea of, now that my background is known to the DM or the GM, that he can, like you said, later on take some ideas or some things like a town or a friend that my backstory has and throw it into the game. Maybe not as anything crazy like a quest or anything, but someone to meet or a cool excursion to the game.
Yeah, no, it can be something as minor as just a little color to an existing episode of the game, or it can generate an entire subplot within the game. It just really depends on how the GM, what the material is that they're working with, and how it inspires the GM to take advantage of it. Not everything that somebody comes in up with in their backstory is going to be solid gold material that the GM can create a whole, side quest out of, but certainly there's the possibility, and especially if you keep it open-ended enough and you keep it detailed but not rigid, so that the GM can play with it a little bit.
Yeah, and actually, you and I were in a game where I ended up doing that. Actually, I ended up becoming a villain. I don't know if you remember Dave and his witch doctor. And he had a background character that he just told the table about, and he told me about. He ended up actually becoming like a secondary villain to the whole game. Really pissed him off.
Okay, we're not necessarily recommending that part, the pissing off of players and or GMs, but it can happen, I guess.
Yeah. And I think a really cool thing that you can do is, I think if we all build our backgrounds together, the thing is that a lot of players come from an isolated environment when they're making their character.
Yes.
And there are some games that have mechanics where you come into the game having bonds with other people. And I like that idea because you can have bonds with other people, bonds with the world, and that helps add a little bit to the campaign.
I agree.
Or the world, at least.
That definitely can be a potential source. Yeah, I'm a little less enthusiastic about forced connections.
Yep.
In the sense of, if it's a mechanics thing in the back of the game, sometimes it becomes a little contrived, whereas if it's generated creatively as backstory, it flows a little more organically. And look, you don't have to feel like you guys need to do a complex or protracted long backstory for every character you do.
Please don't.
Absolutely, you do not need to do that. Honestly, from a GM standpoint, more isn't necessarily better. Sometimes a one-page, really sort of well thought out, interesting snippet of a backstory is better than 5 pages of excruciating minute detail where, you tell the GM what your favorite food was when you were 8 years old. They don't care about that stuff. Even though it feels, rich and exciting and interesting and creative to you guys. And it's fine if you generate it. Just understand that level of granularity is not going to help your GM.
The GM has enough to worry about. He doesn't want to worry about that.
Yeah. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
So besides that, what other limitations should we put on so we don't break anything? Because we do want to add, but we don't want to make anything too big. I wouldn't let anyone make a country, but definitely a town.
Oh, you mean for where they're from?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Look, yeah, if you want to describe the circumstances of the village that you're from, and you even want to locate it geographically, it doesn't have to be in the, the canon, the rule books that it comes from, the maps and whatever else. You can say, oh, well, on about this region right here, there's a little hamlet that my guy is from.
Exactly.
And this is a little bit about it and how he grew up in it. Again, save what you had for breakfast when you were 8 years old,
yeah.
but talk about that a little bit.
But it's good to let the GM know.
Well, and beyond letting them know, asking them. Like, say, hey, this is my idea. Does this work? Is this cool? Is this going to screw up anything else that you have planned? Because
if that's where the zombie plague starts in that general area, it's like, oh no.
I mean, that's a staple in any game at this point. So, yes.
Exactly. But it's good to know, just in case, depending on what game you're playing, if you're going through that area,
sure,
it would be cool to say, hey, look, this is where I'm from.
And that gives the GM an opportunity. Look, if the GM knows that they're putting you through an A to B quest where you start here and you end up there, but the route you take may be flexible. If one of their players came up with a cool idea for a geographical location where they're from that's between A and B, or even in the general area, the GM could then say, you know what, that gives me an idea for an episode or a side quest or even just a progression of the main storyline, to then take your party through that area, and then that opens up lots of possibilities for just a richer experience.
And we've both been in games where stuff like that's happened, and it makes the world feel more lived in, which we'll talk about in another video. But so stay tuned for that. But I do want to mention that there is, you and I talked about this, there is a game that does have a mechanic that lets the players help make the world. It's called Dungeon World. Mm-hmm. But we've played, and you brought up a really good point when we were discussing this, that you don't really want to play a game like that if you're playing with players that aren't mature enough to help build a good world.
Yeah, this is a little tricky and a little controversial, but the amount that you get from your players should be proportionate to what they're capable of doing and interested in doing. So, and a lot of these sort of cooperative storylines where you're having the players define major parameters of a story, you have to have a lot of trust in the fellow players.
Definitely.
To be that this troop is experienced, that they know how to exercise moderation, they are creative, but they're not domineering, they're not power hungry, because you want to maintain a balance. You want to kick that creative ball back and forth between a bunch of different people and create this environment that's fun for everybody. If you're not 100% on if you're playing, well, just for example, say you're playing at a con and you're playing with a bunch of strangers.
Yeah.
Now, that could conceivably be chaotic fun to just have a bunch of people you don't know just throw crazy creative stuff at you. But more often than not, that situation is probably going to end up being more chaos and less creative.
Yes.
And people may try and do power play type things to try and engineer a more enjoyable experience for them, possibly at the other player's expense. Yeah. So, just, I would say, asterisk when you're doing a game like Dungeon World, where you're letting players pick the rules. That you go you be a little careful with that one. But yeah.
Definitely. So I guess the main takeaways is that talk to your GM before really doing anything. Hopefully your GM's open-minded enough to let you contribute. It's not like they're my precious setting kind of game. I have played in those games. I'm sure you have too.
Sure. Well, GMs can fall victim to the same thing that players can with regard to when players write a too detailed a background. GMs can write too detailed a scenario and too rigid a scenario or a campaign where they don't want to deviate from all these great ideas that they have come up with. Yeah. And as a result, they end up railroading you through a story. Essentially, you're not playing a role-playing game at that point. You're listening to an audiobook.
I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of running one of those.
It happens from time to time. If you're sure that you've come up with a piece of solid gold or a plot line, and then your players are like, yeah, I know you wanted this to be a pirate adventure, but we decided to take a caravan across the desert instead. And you're like, well, here's this 50 pages of stuff I wrote. Gone. So, that happens.
But don't be discouraged. Please talk to your GMs. Ask what you can do to help make your character feel like they belong to the world and like you helped create the world.
Yeah, pitch them ideas. GMs mostly love that.
Yes. The less work we have to do, the better.
The one thing that I would say is be careful about backgrounds that leverage or jigger the rules. Like if you come up with a background because you really want to take advantage of a rules loophole to make your character more powerful, GMs will tend to frown on that because, again, the GM's job is to keep everybody kind of equal.
Yes.
Parity lends itself to a more enjoyable game for the group as a whole. If one person knows a lot about the rules and tries to leverage something in the background to get an advantage in their background to get an advantage, that can be a problem. I will say though, if you do it cooperatively with the GM, and this is one that you and I were talking about, take for example, a magic user. Maybe you want to tweak some spells to better fit your character's background or history or religion or ethos in some way. As long as you're not making a spell more powerful, but just sort of changing it, or any kind of ability really. But the example I came up with was magic. Yeah. I think that's cool, especially if your GM likes the creative aspect and wants to play with it a little bit. Just understand that the GM's going to have veto power on that.
Definitely. They probably won't let anything into the game that they don't want. But that goes without saying. We appreciate you guys asking us these questions and asking our opinions on these. We find it helpful that you guys want to know things, and we love to talk about it.
Thank you, Wendell, for being the first one.
Yes.
I trust and hope that you won't be the last one, and I echo Justin's sentiment to encourage you guys to throw us questions suggestions of things that you'd like to hear us talk about and kick around. Because just like a role-playing game, this show can be a cooperative effort too. So come and join and participate and help share your ideas to make this whole thing better.
I agree. And I think we should always remember to game on.
Oh wow, what a segue! Yeah. So this is it for Game On Outdoor Edition, and until next time, guys. Thanks a lot.